The next generation of Flight Simulator is finally out, at least according to PC Gamer, and it brings with it some great new features for everyone in the X-Plane ecosystem. That's the important part, the X-Plane ecosystem. Let's talk about it. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a first impressions / review of X-Plane 12. I'll be discussing all the features that X-Plane 12 brings, how it stacks up against the other flagship simulator out in the market, aka MSFS 2020, and why I personally won't be upgrading to X-Plane 12 from my present installation of FS 2020 just yet. So stay tuned for all of that. Now, just before we get started, I have to say that these videos do take a little bit of effort to actually try and put together, so if you guys do enjoy the content you guys are seeing on Flyby Simulations, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to the channel so you can stay up to date with all the Flight Simulator news. Also, do make sure to join my Discord server linked down in the description section below, and comment down below if you'd like to see some more X-Plane 12 first impressions videos and so on. We do videos on FS 2020 as I mentioned before, but I might be open to diversifying if there is enough demand in the community. So do let me know in the comment section, and also join my Discord server where we can continue this conversation going forward. Now, before I start my opinion today, I simply want to say that I am a huge fan of X-Plane / Laminar research and what they have strived to create. Now, for those of you that don't know, the first proper flight sim I ever touched was X-Plane 11, and the sim I built this channel on was also X-Plane 11, so I have a massive respect to the developers of what they've tried to create with so little. I mean, it's easy to compare this simulator with FS 2020, but it's easy to also forget that FS 2020 has the backing of massive studios like Asobo and Microsoft, whereas Laminar Research comparatively is a much smaller team trying to create something that is so impactful for the flight simulation community, so massive respect to the developers. I also have to say that this is a pre-release version of X-Plane 12, so it's unfair to judge it as if it were in its complete state. However, being realistic, it's not going to change leaps and bounds by the time the official release rolls around, so it's going to be a pretty fair estimate of how it's actually going to look when the final release drops. So that's what we're going to be, taking a look at as we move along with this review today. Alright, so we'll split up everything into three different sections: the world, the airports, and the weather. Starting with the world, nothing much has really changed. Yes, the official website might say there have been massive changes made to the world, but realistically and relative to the competition that literally includes 2 petabytes of real satellite imagery infused with a sophisticated AI to help generate 2D imagery into 3D objects, yeah, nothing much has really changed, so let's talk about it nonetheless. So X-Plane 12 brings with it a photometric lighting engine, utilizing new techniques to bring a truly HDR and a more true-to-life experience while flying. The engine now uses real-time physics-calculated light brightness, intensity, and spread, which is miles better from what we have seen on X-Plane 11, especially when observing haze or, environments with different colors, especially during dawn and dusk times. I personally noticed that it looks much better than X-Plane 11. I do have to say that I subjectively do still prefer Microsoft Flight Simulator's lighting engine here, since it's able to better represent the world in a realistic manner. There might be modding potential here to alter the engine using, programs like Reshade and other freeware and payware programs, but then we're falling right back into the rut of spending hundreds of dollars to make a bare bones looking sim better. I much rather prefer FS 2020 in this respect, as it's an out-of-the-box sim that is absolutely fantastic in the way that it represents the world, and this is after fiddling around with X-Plane 12 for the past 2 days. So you'll understand when I say this, it's not just like a first impressions kind of thing. I know now that X-Plane 12 is capable of certain things, and I know what FS 2020 is capable of, so I think there's miles of difference in between the two simulators. Next up in the world, let's talk about the water. There is now gorgeous global water rendering complete with wave height controls and float plane interaction based on feedback from expert pilots. Now, from a simming standpoint, this is great, since now float planes and aquatic aircraft have more potential in the sim as well. However, again, the raw textures of the water I've seen in the sim so far are lackluster when compared with the global water engine you see in Microsoft Flight Simulator. The engine in FS 2020 interacts heavily with the surrounding world, providing waves, changes in wave structure, water density, and even high and low tides based on the relative position of the moon. So again, I feel that this is definitely a step in the right direction from X-Plane 11, and I feel that this is going to be more and more a theme of this review, where everything should be compared to X-Plane 11, as it's a reiterative build on that version. However, the other flagship simulator out on the market just happens to be FS 2020, and that simulator just happens to be very good at representing real-world artifacts like water and the land and so on. So yeah, definitely a good step in the right direction, but I think FS 2020 again takes a lead in this department. The official Laminar research website also mentions that there are geographically aware watercolors now, which means you'll be able to see changes in the quality of the water as you move from sparse areas to tropical islands and so on. So water masking is a real thing, and the freeware community might be able to exploit this feature to make it more potent in the future. So that's a good thing. Still doesn't beat the out-of-the-box satellite imagery that lends itself to real water masking in FS 2020, but again, that took 2 whole years to properly come to life in FS 2020, and X-Plane 12, I believe, still deserves the same amount of time, in my opinion, before a comparison can be made. But the water masking part of this whole water, rejuvenation in X-Plane 12 definitely deserves a shout out. So there you go. Next up, in the world, we also have changes to the 3D forests, the vegetation, and a complete inclusion of seasons, which is fantastic. There are now a large variety of 3D trees with variation of species, size, and seasonal effects. They interact with their environment, meaning seasonally the color of the leaves will change and the trees will even sway in the wind, which is pretty cool considering I don't think even FS 2020 does that. I have to give props to X-Plane 12 here, since FS 2020 doesn't have seasonality in the sim by default, and it's definitely a step in the right direction to embed it directly in the sim's code. So freeware add-ons can capitalize on this going forward. I really feel that, again, this is where the competition kicks in, and now the fact that X-Plane 12 has advanced this in their simulator, MSFS 2020 might just take the inspiration and, include seasonality natively in the sim in one of their future updates. I still feel the snow accumulation, however, needs work, as it looks a bit unrealistic, and subjectively, I still feel FS 2020 does a better job in terms of the snow coverage and the way it settles on the ground and the way it, sparsely populates mountaintops and so on. So overall, again, no need for programs like XEnviro anymore that cost as much as the sim just to have a better world with seasons. The sim has that inbuilt, which is fantastic. Finally, the entire world now also comes to life with FMOD sounds. Birds in the forest, cars in the cities, and of course ground service vehicles. This is definitely a positive for immersion, but again, this might sound like I'm tooting like FS 2020's horn again and I'm being partial, but FS 2020's audio engine is simply far superior to the one here in X-Plane 11. FS 2020 has custom sounds for geographically aware situations, so you'll hear different sounds in the savannah than you will hear in the Amazon, and that's where the real difference between good and great comes in. So though X-Plane 12 is doing a great job including FMOD sounds for the surrounding environment, which means if you go on a bush trip or like a VFR journey or something like that, you might be able to, immerse yourself in the environment better, FS 2020 has sounds that dynamically change as one goes from dusk to night to dawn to morning, from crickets creaking to birds chirping to the wind bustling against the waves. Everything is simulated just that much better within FS 2020. As much as I hate to admit it, as much as I want X-Plane 12 being the new entrant in the market to crush FS 2020 and have everybody move to it, I really feel like FS 2020 does deserve another shout out here in terms of the sound department, even to the point of them using a physical Doppler effect formula to simulate real-time sounds crashing against surfaces like mountains and buildings. And I'm sorry, but X-Plane 12 still has a long way to go here, unfortunately. Alright, so with that sour note, I'm sorry, but the world is now done in our conversation. Let's talk about the airports though, because this is probably the most time that most simmers will spend, and Laminar Research has dedicated a section to it on their website. So it's a pretty small list of features, but let's run through them nonetheless. Number 1, there is now a tower kit, which means Laminar Research has included a custom suite of endless control tower variation, easy to use for maximal realism, which means now the freeware community and the payware community can literally go ham and try to, find ways to make different air traffic control towers look as unique as they are in the real world, which is pretty cool. There's also now animated jetways, which is a great upgrade from X-Plane 11. Jetways will now move to your aircraft and meet your aircraft when you're parked at the gate, which is really cool to see. I think, again, I feel like FS 2020 advanced this, as they had native jetway connection, and I think X-Plane 12 has definitely taken inspiration from that. Now, this next one is really cool. There's localized ATC procedures and voices. Air traffic control now follows regional procedures and accents around the world, which is pretty cool. We'll get to that in just a second. Let me just finish with the airport. Finally, there's also pavement effects, which means that airport artists can now choose from a library of pavement effects to perfectly capture the look and feel of airports by setting the level of cracking, oil spills, pavement material, and more. Again, this is more for the freeware and payware modding community so that they can make the sim look as nice as they want, you know, your download community to enjoy, I guess. So again, pretty cool stuff. In my opinion, the tower kit and the pavement effects are, as I said before, more for the modding community to play with, but again, it does provide the community with more ways to edit and create realistic airport environments, so props to them for that. I won't even be comparing these to FS 2020 because I think it's more of a win-win for both sims. I really do not like how FS 2020 has incorrect taxiways and generic taxiways and runway markings, but I do like how realistic the surrounding environment in FS 2020 looks like. On the complete flip side, X-Plane's legendary scenery gateway system is a great way to ensure realistic airport environments, but from a graphical perspective, I do feel that FS 2020 still has the upper hand. So it's more of a win-win. It depends on what you personally prefer. I would personally like, FS 2020 because it has more potential, especially with new mods and scenery packs coming out. I think you can do more with FS 2020, but if X-Plane's your kind of thing, then, do whatever floats your boat, I guess. What I was really impressed with, though, is the region-specific accents and the new and improved ATC system in X-Plane 12. This was definitely a sore point. Correction, a massive sore point in X-Plane 11, as the ATC quite literally sucked. I mean, following local SIDs or standard instrument departure procedures and STARS, standard terminal arrival procedures, was a pain, and I was often redirected into mountains while the ATC vectored me around. So having the new ATC engine adhere to local and regional procedures while maintaining immersion through local accents is definitely a point I'll be giving to X-Plane 12 over FS 2020. Now again, I haven't had time to personally test this yet, but I'm assuming it's true since they've mentioned it explicitly on their website. Even FS 2020, as I just mentioned, doesn't do regional accents, so I'd have to say props to X-Plane 12 here, and I really hope, FS 2020 takes this into consideration for one of their future updates and gives us these local accents, because it's just going to be a whole new level of immersion if we can fly into India and have Indian accents, or fly into Brazil and have a person's, a Brazilian accent or something like that. So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to that. Alright, so with the airports covered, the last point I have to cover is, of course, the weather. So by far the most prominent improvements or additions have been made in the weather department for this sim, and as you might have seen from so much of the Laminar research marketing material for X-Plane 12, that's what everybody's been talking about, that's what everybody's been raving about. So let's check it out and let's see what, the new weather engine has to offer. Now I have to say that again, though I'm impressed with the inclusion of volumetric clouds, which is probably one of the main things that people were looking forward to with X-Plane 12, they're relatively the worst looking volumetric clouds I've seen in any sim. In fact, I'd even go as far as to say I even prefer the P3D version 5.3 volumetric clouds way more than the ones I see here, and I don't think there's any comparison to be made with the ones in FS 2020 or even DCS World. I feel like Laminar Research overdid the apparent fluffiness within the clouds and made them look more like cotton candy than real clouds. Yes, FS 2020 has been a victim of this criticism too, but the variety of cloud types and genuine cloud formation within FS 2020 excuses its puffy looking clouds from time to time. So personally, the clouds in X-Plane 12 are really not for me. I did, trust me, I don't know, maybe it sounds like I'm very partial in this video, but I did truly try liking them, especially with my love for X-Plane. But as you might have seen in some of the shots in the background here, they're literally shimmering in the background, and everything is on max settings. So I have shimmering clouds in the background. As soon as I, tone down the evening weather down to like dusk or dawn in the morning or something like that, the clouds are shimmering all over the place. The anti-aliasing looks a little off. The ambient occlusion looks a little bit off. And I just feel like it's a whole lot more simpler in FS 2020, even though the clouds might sometimes look like they're ash clouds from volcanoes. I think there's more potential, again, in FS 2020 for them to generate clouds and make them look more realistic. X-Plane, I think, overdid it. I hope the final release version is a bit more tweaked and looks a little bit more better. But again, that's just like my personal preference here. So I don't know what you guys think. Let me know in the comment section below what you guys think of the volumetric clouds. I'd actually love to know your opinion on this. Now, I have to say that the inclusions of better real-world phenomena like real-time weather injection with multiple cloud and wind layers, realistic thermals, wake turbulence from other aircraft, and so on are welcome additions to the sim and will truly make it a much better and more immersive experience when compared to X-Plane 11. But again, FS 2020 in my opinion has an upper hand here. I do like the fact though that now terrain updrafts can naturally cause gliders to maintain or even increase their altitude without the need for tow planes or slew mode. So it's good to see that real physics is now again being used to simulate these conditions, and that more is now possible with what was already a great simulation experience in X-Plane 11, especially when it comes to gliders. I think X-Plane was one of the first platforms to properly integrate helicopters into their simulator, and I think they're, doing a good job with now aquatic aircraft, as I mentioned before, as well as gliders, which is really great to see. I know X-Plane 11 had gliders, but X-Plane 12 is just improving that experience, as I just said. Now, right before we finish this review, I think it's important to touch on who this sim might be for, because let me make it abundantly clear, X-Plane as a platform is still amazing. Many believe that it still has better flight modeling and physics than FS 2020, despite FS 2020's prowess and technology on paper, and I'm actually one of those people too in certain situations. I feel it would be equally lazy or egocentric of me just to not cover the positive aspects of this sim, as it would be for me to not make a review in the first place. So let's quickly touch on that before calling it a day for today's video. So let's talk about those people that this sim would indeed be appropriate for. Number one, I think it's a great step up for those already on X-Plane 11. I think we already spoke about this a little bit throughout the review, but for those who have already invested hundreds or even thousands of dollars into X-Plane 11 or 10 or any of the previous versions of the simulator, X-Plane 12 is definitely a worthwhile upgrade. Many third-party developers like, Tolis and Flight Factor, who are the prominent aircraft developers, as well as Orbex, which is probably one of the largest scenery developers for any simulator out there, have already committed to bringing support to X-Plane 12, and with the new and improved support being provided to developers with the various toolkits in X-Plane 12, owners of the previous generation of X-Plane definitely have some great stuff to look forward to, and I would definitely say that if you're on X-Plane 11, your hype for X-Plane 12 is not underrated. It's definitely something that you will enjoy. Number two, let's talk about the people on Macs and Linux machines. Now, I don't know how many of you guys actually use MacBooks or iMacs to game or sim on, but I would highly advise against it, considering, Macs are never good for gaming or simming or any of that stuff. I think PCs are better for this. However, being someone who had a 13-inch MacBook Pro and essentially started his simming hobby through that MacBook Pro, on very low settings, let me mind you, I definitely have to thank X-Plane 11 and Laminar for maintaining compatibility with my machine. I know there have to be several others in the community who don't have access to the Windows PC or an Xbox console, which FS 2020 of course runs on, and would rather run the sim on a Mac or Linux machine. And for that small subset of people, this sim is essentially the only option you have, and once again, to reiterate, a great flight simming option. So I think for those people on Macs and Linux machines who have invested a lot in their computers and simply do not wish to switch to a PC right now, but still wish to get into the flight simulation hobby, I would definitely say that X-Plane 12 is the only and a great option. Number three, and this is one of the final reasons I have, the airliner flight model. Now again, this is something subjective, but many in the community who have tried all the mainstream simulators such as P3D, X-Plane, and FS 2020 strongly believe that X-Plane has some of the best flight modeling or physics on the market, despite the technology being integrated by FS 2020. The airplanes simply feel more true to life, more interactive with their respective environments, and this is all the more true with airliners, where you can genuinely feel their weight while taking off, landing, or even turning them sometimes. I feel that FS 2020 has more potential. Again, in this regard, I think that's another theme throughout this review, where FS 2020 has more potential, but it still has to harness that potential before it gets to the level of X-Plane when it comes to the flight modeling. So I think FS 2020 has more potential, since the modern non-legacy code has more of an ability to grow and improve. However, at present, I would indeed agree that X-Plane's flight physics just feel right. Unfortunately for me personally, that isn't reason alone to switch to X-Plane, as I feel FS 2020 offers much more and will eventually improve to X-Plane levels of flight physics and modeling, but all this is simply to say for those hardcore simmers who don't care about satellite imagery or pretty looking scenery, which is, the main criticism people get for Flight Simulator 2020, X-Plane 12 is a training-worthy commercial simulator that will appeal to your preferences, and I think you will have a lot of fun with this simulator, just like I did with X-Plane 11. So in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, with that all said, X-Plane 12 is a decent improvement to the X-Plane franchise. I am disappointed that it didn't come with more in the box, as I had higher expectations for it, but it's definitely a decent upgrade nevertheless. The world, the airports, and the weather system has been entirely enhanced, and now it's going to be a patient wait to see what the sim evolves into within a year, 2 years, or 5 years from now, once it's been tinkered with enough by the community, I guess. As I mentioned before, most of the primary content on my channel will continue to focus on FS 2020, despite the immense respect I have for the Laminar research team for what they have accomplished with a much smaller team relative to what Asobo and Microsoft have at their disposal. However, if you do want to see more X-Plane 12 content on this channel, be sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comment section what kind of content you'd like to see specifically. Do also make sure to join my personal Discord server, linked down in the description section, to continue the conversation and talk about X-Plane 12 as well as the rest of the flight simulation market. Let me know your thoughts, and until the next time, thanks for flying by.